We live in a culture that has taught us a very simple rule. If something isn't happening, do more, try harder, take more control, plan more, persist more. But there comes a point where the very impulse that builds also begins to destroy. Not everything in life responds to force. Some things respond to openness, others respond to time. Still others simply come to fruition when we stop constantly interfering. Nature offers countless examples of this. No farmer pulls on a plant to make it grow faster. He prepares the soil, he protects the earth, he waters it when necessary. Then they wait. This waiting period isn't laziness, nor is it neglect. It's respect for the natural rhythm of life. However, when it comes to ourselves, we completely forget this wisdom. We want to rush relationships, anticipate results, control our emotions. Eliminate all uncertainty. We live as if every minute had to produce some kind of visible progress. Perhaps it is precisely this difficulty in trusting the process that explains why so many people feel exhausted. Not just because of overwork, but because of an excessive control. There is an important difference between taking action and trying to control everything that happens. This difference lies at the heart of one of the most profound ideas in Taoist philosophy. It is called Wu Wei, literally translated. Wu Wei usually means non-action, but this translation creates a misunderstanding that has long been associated with this concept. Because Taoism has never taught passivity, Laozi was not suggesting that people abandon their responsibilities or wait for life to sort everything out on its own. The idea is much more subtle. Wu Wei describes an action that is not born of anxiety. It means acting without going against the natural course of things. It means participating in life without trying to control every detail of it. The Tao Te Ching itself illustrates this idea time and again through the example of water. Water does not confront the mountain with violence. It does not demand that the rock disappear. It finds a way. It flows around it. It adapts. It persists. And precisely because it doesn't waste energy fighting against what it cannot change, it ends up transforming the landscape over time. Much of our suffering doesn't stem solely from the problems we face. It stems from the way we fight against what is already happening. When a door closes, we try to force it open. When someone decides to leave, we try to stop them. When we grow older, we try to negotiate with time. When we feel fear, we try to banish it immediately. We almost always believe that the intensity of our effort demonstrates commitment. But there's an uncomfortable question that deserves to be asked. What if part of that effort isn't bringing you closer to what you want, but pushing you further away? This isn't just a philosophical reflection. In recent decades, psychologists have come to call this phenomenon the paradox of control. The more we try to control certain internal states, such as sleep, relaxation, or certain thoughts, the harder it tends to be to achieve them. Interestingly, many centuries before this research existed, Taoist masters had already observed this same principle by observing rivers, the wind, and the cycles of nature. They realized something that still defies our intuition today. Not every force produces motion. Sometimes force produces resistance, and that is precisely where the real conversation about Wu Wei begins, because understanding this principle doesn't just change the way you work, it can change the way you love, the way you age, the way you cope with loss. And, above all, how to stop turning your own life into a battle against something that never needed to be an enemy. There is a subtle difference between dedication and tension. At first glance, they seem the same. Both require energy, both involve commitment, both can take up hours of our day. But you only need to observe them closely to realize that they stem from completely different places. Dedication arises when there is clarity. Tension arises when there is fear. A dedicated person works because they believe in the value of what they are building. A stressed person works because they fear losing what they haven't even achieved yet. On the surface, the two behaviors may seem identical. Deep down, they are completely different experiences. It is precisely this difference that Taoism invites us to recognize. Laozi never condemned action. On the contrary, life demands action all the time. We plant, we build, we raise children, we care for others, we make difficult decisions. The problem has never been taking action. The problem begins when every action becomes driven by the need to control the outcome. That is when effort ceases to be a natural expression of life and becomes a constant attempt to negotiate with the future. This shift is almost imperceptible. It happens when a relationship ceases to be a connection between two people and becomes an attempt to prevent the other person from leaving. When work ceases to be an opportunity to contribute and becomes the sole measure of one's self-worth. When rest ceases to be rest because the mind keeps churning out lists, predictions, and worries. Without realizing it, we stop living in the present moment to manage scenarios that don't yet exist. The Taoist philosopher Zhuangzi illustrated this principle admirably in a passage known as Ding the Butcher. The butcher had been preparing oxen for a prince for many years. His knives remained sharp far longer than expected. Intrigued, the prince asked what the secret to his skill was. The butcher replied that he did not cut with force. He followed the natural gaps between the bones and joints. Instead of fighting against the animal's structure, he allowed his movements to follow what was already there. That's why his knives hardly ever wore out. This story was never just about cooking. It describes a way of life. The person who insists on pushing open every door ends up getting tired quickly. The one who learns to recognize which doors actually open conserves energy to go much farther. This wisdom may seem far removed from modern life. In fact, it shows up every day. Think of a conversation. There are encounters where every sentence seems to require effort. Words are chosen with excessive care. There's a constant fear of saying the wrong thing. The dialogue loses its spontaneity. Now, think of a conversation with someone you truly trust. The words flow naturally. Silence doesn't feel awkward. Nothing needs to be carefully calculated. Understanding comes almost effortlessly, not because there is less attention, but because there is less resistance. This pattern also applies to learning. Those who try to memorize every detail tend to forget quickly. Those who understand the principles behind a subject rarely need to memorize everything. The mind learns best when it leaves room for connections to happen naturally. Interestingly, contemporary psychology observes something similar. Research on performance shows that moderate levels of arousal improve performance, but excessive anxiety tends to impair it. In sports, music, and other complex skills, too much self-control can disrupt movements that have already been learned, a phenomenon often called analysis paralysis. The athlete begins to overthink movements that he or she used to perform intuitively. The musician starts to scrutinize every gesture. The speaker monitors every word. The result is usually the exact opposite of what was expected. Spontaneity disappears. This doesn't happen because of a lack of effort. It happens because the effort has ceased to serve the action and has begun to compete with it. This is perhaps one of the most profound contributions of Taoism. It reminds us that controlling is not the same as caring. Insisting is not the same as persevering. Forcing is not the same as acting. Perhaps this is precisely what we lack in many moments of life. If this video has given you a new perspective on your journey, subscribe to the channel. Here, we explore the teachings of Taoism, Zen, and Eastern wisdom in a practical and profound way to help you live with greater clarity, serenity, and presence. And if this reflection resonated with you in any way, leave a comment below. What are you ready to stop chasing and start allowing? I read every comment. See you in the next video. Until then, go with the flow.